So Real Madrid were worthy winners. Sorry, Chris, about that in the final last night. Well, Boris Johnson is unworthy of the office of Prime Minister, some might think. Worthiness and unworthiness are very prominent themes in this passage in Luke chapter 7, and the centurion and his servant. And so we'll think about worthy, unworthy, as we explore this passage together. Well, notice first of all then that the centurion sends for Jesus. The centurion sends for Jesus. A centurion here in Capernaum, he's a Gentile soldier, not necessarily Roman. Romans employed other nationalities in their army, but he's a Gentile soldier with approximately 100 men under his command. It wasn't always exactly 100. Similar, some have suggested, to a captain in our own army. He was resident there in Capernaum by the Sea of Galilee. A slave of his, a servant, is sick. Literally, it says he was having it bad and about to die. Matthew tells us he was paralyzed and terribly tormented. The centurion heard of Jesus, and that's not surprising. He lives in Capernaum, and already in Luke's Gospel, in chapter 4 and verse 31, Jesus went down to Capernaum, a town in Galilee, and on the Sabbath began to teach the people. There in the synagogue in Capernaum is the man who has an evil spirit, and Jesus commands the evil spirit to leave the man. And then later that day in Capernaum, Luke chapter 4 and verse 40, when the sun was setting, the people brought to Jesus all who had various kinds of sickness, laying his hands on each one, he healed them. Moreover, demons came out of many people, shouting, "You are the Son of God." So those healings had been performed in Capernaum. And then also the man, the paralyzed man who was let down through the roof. That happened in Capernaum in Mark and chapter 2. Mark tells us that it was in Capernaum that that house was situated, and Luke records that miracle as well. It's no wonder that this man has heard of Jesus and his amazing power. And so he sends for Jesus. He sends certain Jewish elders to Jesus to ask him to come to help, to come and heal his servant. Literally, to bring him safely through. It's part of the word that's related to salvation, to save him, to bring him safely through, to heal him. The Jewish elders, they do their work earnestly. We're told in verse 4, they came to Jesus and pleaded earnestly with him, "This man deserves to have you do this because he loves our nation and has built our synagogue." So here we have the first worthy. Literally, that's the first thing they say. Worthy he is that you should do this for him. That's the first word they speak to Jesus. Worthy. This man is deserving. He is worthy that you should do this. They emphasize his worthiness. He is deserving. He merits it. Why? Because he loves our nation. That was quite unusual in the first century. For a Gentile to love the Jewish nation. Many despised the Jews because they were so different and arrogant. But this man loves our nation and has built our synagogue, literally has himself built our synagogue at his own expense. He has provided for the building of the synagogue there in Capernaum. He's deserving, he's worthy, this man, that you should help him in this distress regarding his servant. He is worthy. The centurion then sends for Jesus. These Jewish elders emphasize that he is worthy and deserving. But then, secondly, the centurion stops Jesus. He sends for Jesus, but then he stops Jesus. Verse 6, Jesus went with him. He was not far from the house when the centurion sent friends to say to him, Lord, don't trouble yourself, for I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. With Jesus nearing the house, friends are sent to prevent Jesus coming. It's not because the house is a mess. Sorry, my wife's not had the time to tidy up and sweep and hoover, and it's not because of that. And it's not because, I don't think it's because he's a Gentile. A number of commentators suggested it's because he's a Gentile. But he doesn't say, we could understand that because in Luke's second volume in Acts chapter 10 and verse 28, when Peter goes to the home of another centurion, Cornelius, it's interesting, the 4 centurions mentioned in the New Testament are all quite noble men. But Peter says in Acts 10 verse 28, he said to them, you are well aware that it is against our law for a Jew to associate with a Gentile or visit him. And over in Acts 11 verse 3, when Peter is being criticized for what he did in going to Cornelius's house, Acts 11 verse 3 says, Peter's critic says, you went into the house of an uncircumcised man and you ate with them. But I don't think that's what this centurion is saying. He doesn't say, it is not fitting that you come to my house because I'm a Gentile and you're a Jew. He doesn't say, it is not fitting. He says, I am not fit. And it's a different word he uses here. It's not the same word about deserving and being worthy. This is a word that says, I'm not fit. I am not sufficient to have you come to my house. And that's reinforced by what he says in verse 7. That is why I did not even consider myself worthy to come to you. And that's a word that's related to that word in verse 4 about deserving, being worthy. And so he makes very clear, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy, I'm not fit that you should come to my house. Didn't even think myself worthy to come to you personally. Matthew, when he records this incident, has the centurion coming to Jesus himself on both occasions, both with the request for help and telling Jesus not to come to the house. In Matthew's gospel, it's the centurion who does both of those. But Matthew's focus, I think it's Matthew 8, his focus is on the centurion's nationality. In what develops, you can see that that's what Matthew is focusing on, that here is a Gentile. Anything superfluous to that is ignored. He just wants to concentrate on the fact that he's a Gentile. Luke's focus is on the centurion's humility, not his nationality, it's humility. So it's not a contradiction here. Matthew says that the centurion did it. Well, he did it by his agents, either the Jewish elders or his friends. Just as when the Jews earlier said, he built our synagogue. They didn't mean he did it himself. He had it done by others. And so when Matthew says that the centurion went to Jesus, he went by means of either the Jewish elders or his friends. But here is his humility. He is unworthy. Lord, don't trouble yourself, for I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. I'm not fit. I'm not sufficient for you to come under my roof. That is why I did not even consider myself worthy to come to you in person. But now notice he sent for Jesus to come. That was what his purpose was there in verse 3. The centurion heard of Jesus and sent some elders of the Jews to him, asking him to come and heal his servant. But now he says, when Jesus is nearly come, don't come. I'm not worthy. Don't come into the house. What's happening here? I think William Hendrickson is correct in his comment. It would seem, therefore, that the more, in the meantime, the centurion reflected on the greatness of Jesus, on his power, exalted majesty, holiness, and willingness to help, the more also he was ashamed of himself and impressed with the fact that his previous request had been unnecessary. He becomes overwhelmed with a sense of his own unworthiness. So having asked Jesus to come, and he hears that Jesus is coming, as he reflects on what's going on here, he is overwhelmed with a sense of his own unworthiness, and so sends these friends to Jesus to stop Jesus coming to the house. He is worthy, the Jew says. Worthy is he. I'm not worthy. I'm not fit to have you. I wonder how you think of yourself. Worthy or unworthy? Came across this quote from Bernard of Clairvaux, the Middle Ages church leader. He says this: to be sure, if all our acts of righteousness, scrutinized in the light of truth, are found to be like the rag of a menstruous woman, something revolting and disgusting. That's what Isaiah 64 verse 6 says. Then Bernard says, to what will our unrighteous acts be compared? If our righteous acts, all our righteous acts are compared to something revolting and disgusting, what will our unrighteous acts be compared to? This centurion has a sense of his unworthiness. For all that he has done, all his righteous acts, now I am unworthy. I am undeserving. I am insufficient for Jesus. The centurion sends for Jesus, but then the centurion stops Jesus. But then finally, the centurion trusts Jesus. The centurion trusts in Jesus. So he said, I am neither fit or worthy for a personal encounter. For you to come to my house or for me to come to you, I'm neither fit nor worthy for that personal encounter with you, but that's not necessary. Just say the word. Verse 7, that is why I did not even consider myself worthy to come to you, but say the word and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority with soldiers under me. I tell this one, go, he goes, that one, come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it. His own authority that was derived and subordinate. Notice what he says, I myself am a man under authority. So he's got authority, but it's derived from those above him. But his own authority, though it's derived and subordinate, is nonetheless effective. It worked. Go, and he goes. To another soldier, come, and he comes. To his staff, do this, and they do it. That convinces him of the authority of Jesus. So the effectiveness of his own authority, though it's derived and subordinate to those above him, convinces himself of the authority of Jesus. And he's arguing from the lesser to the greater. How much more the authority of Jesus will be effective here. Thomas Fuller says, concluding from his own authority over his staff, that Christ, by a more absolute power as Lord High Marshal of all maladies, without his personal presence, could by his bare word of command order any disease to march or retreat at his pleasure. Jesus has greater authority than even this centurion. He can command any disease to march or retreat at his pleasure. When Jesus heard this, verse 9, he was amazed at him. Turning to the crowd following, he said, I tell you, I've not found such great faith even in Israel. A number of commentators note that we see Jesus amazed twice in the New Testament. Once because of people's unbelief, here because of someone's belief and faith. It was great faith. It's interesting, just back in the previous chapter and verse 19, before Jesus preaches that Sermon on the Mount, we read in chapter 6, verse 19, the people all tried to touch him because power was coming from him and healing them all. Notice there the importance of a personal encounter. We've got to have a personal encounter with Jesus. We've got to touch him. The centurion says, you don't need that. You don't need to come to the house. You don't need to touch my servant. You can just say the word and it will be done. Here is great faith, trusting in the power of Jesus. Trusting in the power of Jesus to bring about this miracle, to deliver his servant from the gates of death. You remember, he is had it so bad, he's nearly dead. He was about to die, we're told at the end of verse 2. He knows that Jesus has authority to stop death, to make it retreat by a word of command. See, the centurion, he doesn't trust in his worthiness. He trusts in Jesus' power. He doesn't trust in his merits and what he deserves. He trusts in Jesus' authority. The Lutheran commentator, Richard Lenski, says, the greatness of the centurion's faith, he says it's apparent in three things. It is apparent in its humility. Here is a centurion, this power who have taken over the land of Israel, an occupying power. He comes to this Jewish rabbi, confessing himself unworthy and unfit. His faith is apparent in its humility. In the second place, this man's faith centers in the word of Jesus. But say the word, speak with a word, speak in a word, and it will be done. Thirdly, the centurion has a proper conception of the exalted person of Jesus. He's seen who Jesus is in great power, and he trusts this exalted, authoritative person to intervene in this desperate situation. He has great faith planted in a great Savior. And so I think this account sets before us these contrasting things of worthiness, unworthiness, trust. He's worthy that you should do this for him. I am unworthy. I am unfit. But I trust in you. That's salvation. That's what will bring you safely through. You know, that's what the centurion said. Come and bring my servant safely through. How will you get safely through? Safely through life, safely through the final judgment. By your own worthiness, you're deserving, you've merited it. No. We have to confess ourselves unworthy, undeserving, unfit. But we trust in Jesus and what he has done in his power, in his authority to save and deliver. One of our hymns says, let not conscience make you linger, nor of fitness fondly dream. All the fitness he requires is to feel your need of him. Lo, the incarnate God ascended, pleads the merit of his blood. Venture on him, venture wholly, trust in Jesus. Let no other trust intrude. None but Jesus can do helpless sinners good. Jesus brings people safely through, not on account of their worthiness, but because they trust in him. Jesus can bring you safely through, not on account of what you deserve, what you've merited, but by trusting in him, venturing on him wholly. And he can do helpless sinners good, as he did that day in Capernaum. Then we're told in verse 10, the men who had been sent returned to the house and found the servant well. Luke doesn't even tell us that Jesus said a word. Jesus willed it, and it was done. Will you trust yourself and your eternity to this Savior, mighty to save? Our final hymn says that we will do that. No more, my God, I boast no more of all the duties I have done. I quit the hopes I had before to trust the merits of your Son. No more, my God, I boast no more